Welcome to the Nicole Osei Report. I'm Nicole Osei, and today we're going to be talking about some simple steps that you can take to lead a healthier, more fulfilling lifestyle, body, mind, and soul. And today I'm very excited to be joined by Yoshi Holland. She is a lifestyle, health, and food consultant out of Atlanta. Welcome.
Hi, Nicole. So good to see you.
You as well. I'm so glad to be talking with you today.
Yeah, me too. I'm ready to dive into, what women can do to get themselves on that healthy path.
Oh, yeah. And it's never too late to start. Never too late to start.
Never,
All right,
never.
so let's go. I always like to start at the beginning of one's journey. And I was reading about how you got started on transforming your health. And from what I read, it started with a medical diagnosis that you received some years ago. And was it in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I ended up at the doctor somehow because I never really had a regular doctor. And the doctor, she was examining me and she said, "Oh, you have a little small cyst," because I didn't feel anything. And I was like, "A what?" And she was like, "Oh, it's small. It's just a cyst. It's small." And I was like, "Oh, no." I remember leaving that office and going to downtown Brooklyn. And there was like this herbalist guy down there. It was an older, like Indian man. And I remember talking to him about, wait, there's something that they say is called a cyst in me. I didn't even know what it was. And I knew it didn't belong there. That was just
Mhm.
something internally I felt like that does not belong there. And if it was created, it can be dissolved somehow. And he gave me just, a couple of things to do, some herbs, change your eating. And I talked to him maybe a couple of times, but after that, I was on my path, and that diagnosis never came up again. Actually, I never returned to the doctor. So, I mean, that's been like 30 something years ago. And I never returned to the doctor, never felt anything from that.
So let me ask you this question. When she said that word, and of course, thank goodness it wasn't anything that was cancerous or anything more serious. But when she said that word,
Mhm.
sis, how did that make you feel to hear that? But then also, how did you feel when you contacted the herbalist and you kind of felt like you now have a path to get this to rectify the situation?
Yeah, I was a little scared at first because that word I had, I was in my 20s and I was like, wait, what is that? And but something in me just said, you know what? You're not going to go any traditional routes. You are going to get rid of this somehow yourself. And after I talked to the herbalist, it just felt almost like, I have a slight cold. It didn't feel, death defying or like, it's going to put me out in any way. I felt internally it was something that I could do about it naturally. hmm
And so, what were those first steps that you took along with the herbalist, and what changes did you start to see?
Yeah, I remember him telling me burdock root. He said, because you've got to cleanse the blood, so burdock root was definitely the one herb that I drank every day. And I didn't put anything in it. And if you've ever had burdock, I mean, it tastes awful. It is
I've
definitely
never had
one
that
of those,
actually.
yeah, it's
So I was
definitely
going to
one of
ask you,
those
how does that
bitters.
taste?
Oh yeah, it is so bitter. And actually now, I know people put honey and lemon and I put nothing. I wanted to make sure that this was gone, so I drank it straight and a giant cup. And it tasted awful, but I didn't care. I was like, no, I'm doing this. And I stopped eating dairy and I stopped eating, well, I know I cut down on breads and I definitely cut down on red meats at that time. And eventually it was gone. And I remember feeling better as well. hmm
Yeah, and I can relate to that because I went, and I'm not suggesting this for anyone, I'm just telling about my personal journey, but I went vegan in 2011, I believed. And I just remember how I started to feel after a few weeks. I did feel like lighter and just there was a big difference. So I
Yeah.
can relate to what you're saying.
And I know what you're saying. And that's what's so interesting now throughout the path of, I'd call it throughout the health journey, we'd say, I learned that it's just different for everyone. I used to think when I heard about, okay, being a vegan, it's like, oh, okay, I can substitute mushrooms for meat. I went on a discovery of just learning different foods to eat. I'm telling you, Nicole, when I tried to go vegan, because I have a lot of willpower, I felt awful. I
And
mean,
I've
it just
talked to
felt
people.
like, huh?
No, I said I've talked to people that it did not work for them. Everyone's journey is different. Yeah.
It is, and that's what I've learned as I move along teaching people. Like, it does not work for everyone, and so eventually I started the alkaline diet. But what I did was, just made famous, of course, by Dr. Sebi, and I learned that wait, maybe I could take a few of these because the meat part that was missing, it did not make me feel well. And I also felt that the Lord was also leading me to, you need to eat some meat. This is not for you. Actually, I felt like he said, I did not lead you to be a vegetarian, a vegetarian or vegan or whatever. And so I started back eating meat, but I also just kept some of the foods from the alkaline diet, and that works really well for me. Yeah,
So you tailored it for yourself. That's good.
exactly. And I think it's like that for everyone because people live in different parts of the world. We have a giant world, over 8 billion people. Everyone can't eat the same diet. We couldn't possibly be created that way to eat the same way.
Exactly. And speaking of that, before we get into your four pillars, we had talked about your upbringing on the East Coast versus the South. And we were
Uh-huh.
talking about the differences in the food and food culture and how that can sometimes play into what someone is eating, what they're used to eating, and if they want to make the change, how difficult or easy that may be. Can you go into that? Because I think a lot of people can identify with what you and I were talking about.
Yeah, it's definitely a really cool dynamic. Um, I was born in New York, and at 2 months old, my mother gave me to my grandparents in Macon, Georgia. And but every summer, I would go to New York to visit my parents in New York City. And eventually, let's see, when I became a teenager, my father did mention, he said, are you still eating pork? And I said, yeah, that's what your mother cooks. So that's what we eat. Some of the time we eat chicken and we eat everything, it's basically. And, but when it came to pork, I would eat pork chops, I guess, and ribs and things like that. But I wouldn't eat those other parts, like the pig ears and the chitlins and all that. And I said, well, yeah, I don't eat those, but I still eat, ribs and pork chops, basically. He's like, yeah, you got to stop eating pork. And then he just went into kind of a little detail about why I should not eat it. It's just not good for you on any level. And so I seem to have stopped eating it. And so that's kind of where it started. I started to pay attention to things of, you know, a lot of people in New York were eating, I guess you would say, I don't really want to say better, but, they definitely they weren't eating pig ears and pig feet and stuff like that. So I kind of latched on to the way when I ate something and the way that I felt. And I totally did realize that, wow, when I stopped eating pork, I actually did feel better. So for me, okay, I'll check that box. And so I guess it really started in my teen years. And now I just feel like also in the South, here in Atlanta, it is a melting pot. Different people eat it.
Definitely.
There's vegans, there's alkaline people, there's, people who only eat meat. So I don't think really now New York or Georgia, there's a significant difference because they both are true melting pots of different cultures and people.
And I guess we'll get into your advice after the pillars in terms of what people can do when they're traveling and they may be in an
Mhm.
area to where they may not have as much access to the healthy foods that they want to eat, or they don't know where to go to get it in this new
Right.
area. But before we get into that aspect and your advice on that front, let's get into your 4 pillars that you talk about with your clients, and that is food, fitness, mind, and spirit. Okay, so let's start
Yeah.
with the obvious. Let's start with the food.
Yeah, that's the obvious one, right? When it comes to food, I mean, changes have to be made. There's just no getting around it. Changes have to be made. I don't care if the sun is up or the sun is down. And, I'd like to give an example. Everything doesn't have to be so drastic. So, for example, we'll use like eating quinoa instead of rice. And I don't care what color it is. And I'm not talking about wild rice. So let's leave wild rice out of it because wild rice kind of goes in the category with quinoa. So, but if you're someone who eats brown rice or white rice, you can totally substitute it with something like quinoa. Quinoa is really, it is a carb, but it's a complex carbohydrate, and it breaks down a lot easier than rice. And that's what it's about in the body, the food breaking down and not just staying stuck. And if you use just your senses and say, hey, you know what, if I take a piece of rice and put it in my hand that's cooked and I mash it, you can feel the stickiness. I mean, even sticky rice is a thing that people like, but that sticky rice is sticking to your gut as well. And if you look at quinoa, I mean, it just kind of falls apart. It's like a real grain, it's an actual seed, but it's used as like a substitute for rice. Um, Basically, it definitely does not stay in the body as long as rice. And it's just really a great healthy alternative. So I like to use that as one of my foods that I like to have my clients try. And I tell you, they actually love it because we don't just eat plain quinoa. I didn't, even when I was eating rice a lot, I still do eat rice sometimes, but when I cook, I normally cook quinoa. I may eat some rice out if I'm at a restaurant, but I'm telling you, when you take quinoa and you mix it with all these beautiful vegetables and colors, yellow peppers, broccoli, kale,
Delicious.
mushrooms, it is delicious. So we don't have any boring meals over here when you're, signing up with my plans. It's all about color and beauty and deliciousness, most certainly.
And
So,
that's a good.
so that's just one of the foods. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Oh,
Mhm.
no, I was just gonna kind of piggyback on what you were saying in terms of all the different colors. I do think that like when like you mentioned, it's not just going to be plain quinoa. You're adding a lot
Mhm.
of different things to it, and also we kind of eat with our eyes as well. So when we're seeing
Yeah.
this, it just makes it more appetizing. I think that makes it easier for people to maybe go down that path and try to eat healthier foods. But when they're seeing all these visually stimulating things.
Yeah. Someone asked me this morning, I was cooking breakfast and someone came up to me and asked, they were like, is that, um, I had quinoa and I had an egg over medium. And they said, is that an egg over medium or is that an egg fried hard? I was like, oh, it's an egg over medium. And I shared with them saying that, when I was a kid, I grew up eating eggs over medium mixed with grits. But I changed it. Now I eat eggs over medium mixed in my quinoa because I eat quinoa for breakfast and it makes it a total breakfast meal. I had that and I had a salmon patty on the side, but it doesn't have white flour in it. It's not fried in vegetable oil. It has grapeseed oil well, I honestly don't use grapeseed oil anymore. Now I use avocado oil or virgin olive oil. So because now we know about the seed oils, those aren't good for you. So you have to keep on top of things, because I was a big grapeseed oil advocate. And so it's my job to stay on top of the things that, oh, this was discovered, that we are not to use this anymore. And then, do the research and find out what is the reason for it. So yeah, so quinoa is definitely one of my choices. I also use chickpea flour a lot. So you don't have to give up flour. You just change, it's just those simple little changes. Um, Actually, I even make my own walnut milk if I want some.
Really?
And it's so simple, Nicole. I mean, you just take walnuts and some water and you put them in the blender and you have walnut milk. It's amazing. Like, can it be any more simpler? And you know exactly what's in it, instead of some pasteurized milk you buy in the store. And so it's simple changes that I look to guide my clients, and they seem to love it.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's get
Yeah,
over to fitness. What are some key
fitness.
things that you suggest for people?
Yeah, so most clients are doing something. I will say this, they are walking, they are, most of them are walking. Some of them do go to the gym and do little things, but they aren't seeing any results. So we're looking at what foods they're eating, in conjunction with, what they are doing in the gym. So laying that out and saying, okay, so you're walking 2 times a week. Maybe we can walk 3 times a week and add 10 more minutes. Maybe that'll help. And we have actually noticed a significant increase in weight loss when they do that, when they increase something, or add something to their lives that they've been wanting to do. So, for example, I recently started playing pickleball. And because my mind was telling me, I'm like, wow, I used to play racquetball a long time ago, but I really still like the act of using a racket. I'm not a person that's going to get on the street and start jogging. So when you make a decision on, what is that thing I really like to do, or I haven't done before, but I want to give it a try? Sometimes people are just really fearful. People are fearful of being in a gym and doing a class because they don't feel like they're as fit as other people in the class. So a lot of the time it's fear. There are people that's
Yeah.
listening to me right now, and they are like, you know what? I want to try this, but I'm just afraid. It's always afraid of what people will think. And we're grown-ups now. We have to get past that fear.
Yes.
And in our groups, we are going to talk about that as well. Being fear of man, that is a stumble as far as Proverbs in the Bible is concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And something else that you mentioned, which is so key, you talked about like doing something that you have an affinity towards or you've tried versus doing something completely outside of the box, because sometimes
Mhm.
people think like, okay, I want to go try running, but for them, they've never done it before. So that can kind of make, I feel like, increase that fear if it's something they've never done. Not saying not to try it, but like you
Right.
said, maybe start with something that you've already done to get you in that comfort zone. And then maybe you can branch out later. Do you find that some of your clients, like when they start with that, they'll eventually kind of branch out to other things?
Exactly, because it's just breaking through that first obstacle. And when you're in a group, this is the first time I'll be actually doing group coaching. Normally my coaching is one-on-one,
Mhm.
but I feel like the group will help encourage. They'll help
Mm.
encourage each other to do different things. We may have a list of like, okay, which one of these fitness activities are you drawn to? What have you thought about and then you just dismissed it? Or, people made fun of you like, oh, girl, you're not getting ready to go, ride no bike. What's wrong with you? And it's like, no, I rode my bike yesterday. I rode my bike to the store. I rode my bike actually to the store, Nicole, and rode it back home, then got in my car and went and got some waters because the waters were too heavy. But I did ride my bike to the
Yeah.
store. And it doesn't look weird because I live in the city. So, but I know me, if I lived in the suburbs, I'm still going to be riding my bike. So that's the way it
Exactly.
is.
And I think we talked about that too, because we both love riding bikes as well. And to get
Yeah.
into the third pillar, the mind.
Ooh, the mind. The playground, right?
Yeah.
So in our mind, we have all these thoughts. Our mind wants to think thoughts all the time, right? But, and then there's some people that say you can't control your thoughts. That is definitely an untruth, because you can think a thought and then say, you know what? I'm going to think about something else because I don't want to think about what I'm thinking about right now. So let me give you an example. For all those listening that said, I can't control my thoughts. So right now, and someone did this with me, so I know it can be done. So right now, I want you to close your eyes and think about a bird, a black bird. And that black bird has an umbrella on top of his head. And he also has a red bow around his neck. Open your eyes. You just thought of that. So you just changed your thoughts. So we know we can change our thoughts. Now, what we have to do is start watching and listening to things that we want our thoughts to be like. So, for example, when it comes, we'll just stick with food. So when it comes to food, we can't watch videos on the 10 top Southern dishes your grandmother made, right?
Right.
We can't do it.
Right.
So my clients are not allowed to listen to that or watch that. And we cannot watch, if you don't want to drink alcohol anymore, we can't watch things where people are partying, drinking alcohol, focused on this drink versus this drink, so you have to intentionally decide and watch things to change that algorithm. You can change your algorithm in a few clicks, and we know we can do that. So I advise you to watch and listen to things that are going to serve you, that are going to serve you better. So start looking up videos about what is the top summer salads, how to make a really great vegetable casserole, and what are some of the best summer healthy fitness choices, if you don't have an instructor, if you're not in a gym. There's so many creative things that you can think about and put it into YouTube or TikTok, whatever you like to watch, and you can make those changes. And that's what we do. That's what we're going to be doing with my personal clients and my group clients.
That's wonderful, because
Yeah.
it just goes to show how we can set ourselves up for success or failure
Mhm.
by
Yeah.
taking that simple step and just changing the algorithm, it will change our thoughts. Eventually, that's what you're going to be thinking about.
It is. It is. And I know that because sometimes you'll see something and this is true, Nicole. We'll look at it and be like, I shouldn't click on that. That's just gossip. We all do it. But it's like, and then no, I need to look at something to help me, build my business or help my clients.
So
Yeah.
we've all been there. Well, yeah.
No help
We've all
at
been there.
all, just gossip.
So that gets into, so we've discussed the mind a bit. Let's get into spirit.
Yeah. Okay.
Fourth
Spirit.
pillar.
Okay, when we talk about spirit, I like to talk about the Holy Spirit. I am a follower of Jesus, so I don't really talk about any other spirits because honestly, I don't know what any other spirits do. So as a follower of Jesus, you have a renewed spirit within you. And it's called the fruit of the Spirit. So we have things already in us like peace, love, we even have long suffering, but there's a way that you can stop the suffering. And when it comes to, we'll keep it with food. We'll keep it with food and health, right? So when it comes to long suffering, you should be at that point where I've suffered enough with this food because there's things that I can do for my health when it comes to food, fitness, and my mind. And it is choices, it is making a decision. And when you already have peace built in you, you have to bring it out into your heart and into your mind. So, as a believer in Jesus, these fruits of the Spirit, you take them and you say, we'll use peace, for example, and we'll say, because peace is a big part of health, and we know that. You can eat all the fruits, vegetables, as much as you want. If you don't have peace in your life, you're very unhealthy. So we work with the total spectrum. I'm looking at total prosperity, which is, your health, your surroundings, all of it, feeds into having a holistic, healthy mind and body. So for example, like I was saying, we go back to peace. How are you going to have peace in your life when you eat something? It only lasts about as long as you're eating it. That's as long as it lasts. And then you have all the guilt that comes after it. But if you take those chances and say, hey, you know what? I want to improve my health, so I'm going to start eating differently. You eat something, you're like, hey, this tastes pretty good. I've never had this before. We'll take quinoa. I've never had quinoa anymore. And you feel it was good. And I love how light I feel after eating it. I'm at peace. you
Yeah.
know, if we're just taking the food. Now, I'm not talking about all the other chaos that may be going on in your life. That's another subject. We have to talk about that on another day.
Yeah, that's on a
but,
different day. Yeah.
but if we're talking about just the food, we can just clip that. We can make it happen. And with taking all of those beautiful things that God has given us into that we have in our spirits, we just have to learn how to draw them out. And that's a lot of what my clients will be learning as well, how to draw those things that's in our spirit, those beautiful fruits of the Spirit, and you draw them out into your heart, into your mind. And when you're having even a bad day, you know you don't go and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to cook a whole chocolate cake and eat half of it because I'm just having a bad day. We're good at doing that. We're good at sometimes taking certain negative situations and saying, okay, I'm going to do something that's against what's good for me because I'm having a bad day. That doesn't even make good sense.
Mm-mm.
But, you know, there's other things that I teach in order to, why don't you do this instead of going to cook some chocolate cake, get some water, go outside and breathe and walk. Just walk. Just look at the flowers, look at the trees, walk, inhale, exhale. It really does work. It takes some diligence in order to pull on that each time, but you'll say, you know what? That actually did feel really good.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
And after a while of pulling in that direction, it becomes a habit. It's not
that's
even it's like second nature.
there you go. There
What
you go.
what do you say to clients who, let's take the four pillars: food, fitness, mind, and spirit. They may be doing great in two areas and maybe neglecting two other areas. So what do you say to clients to kind of drive home the importance of this all has to be done at some point in tandem?
Yeah, I've had, okay, we'll talk about one of my clients I had a few years back. And one of those, she was really good at exercising. She loved to exercise. And let's see, and she had a pretty strong mind too, because she was very prosperous in real estate. We'll put it that way. So she felt good about herself, but she had these other things when it came to food. Um, she thought that she didn't understand why. Well, hey, I exercise like 3 times a week. I'm really putting it in, but the food was the problem. And once she started cooking, I mean, she followed everything I said to a T. And That day, she's the one that, in like a week and a half to 2 weeks after following the food plan that we put together, she was getting on the highway. It was late evening. She reached for her glasses that she normally needed late in the evening. And she said, wow, I do not need them. I
Mm.
could actually see better. So the food that she was eating, it totally had healed her eyesight. And and she kept testing it. You think it's a little fluke or something. She kept testing it, and her eyesight was actually restored from what she was eating, and that is amazing. So I feel like that happens in different ways. Sometimes we may have um there may be a pimple on your face, and that's the one thing that you're zoned in on. But so many other things in your body can be healed, during a certain time, but the pimple is still there and you're still looking at it like, why isn't that healing? But you haven't realized that, wait a minute, I have so much energy. I sleep through the night, and you're focused on that one little pimple that's still sitting there. But let me tell you, if you keep going with the plans, it will eventually go too. Every client that I've worked with have had major success. So if they were just focused and doing really good in two areas, when we added those other two, they were extremely successful. Yeah.
So what do you say when people come to you and they're wanting to start their health journey? What do you say they need to bring to the table?
They need to bring to the table a yes, I'm in. That's it. Once you say yes and you're ready, you don't have to have any knowledge of anything. And you just have to have a willingness to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's just mainly what it comes down to, Nicole. Yeah.
And one other thing that I wanted to ask you about that I just loved when I was reading your site, you wrote, "Don't just exist, experience life."
Ah, yeah. That's my motto for sure. And, we're talking about foods, we're talking about fitness, we're talking about mind and spirit. But some of the other things that I add is when we talk about, I guess we'll say fitness. Fitness, we're talking about where, you want to go and do like pickleball or run or bike. Um, you can also add other things. What about those experiences that you'd like to add to your life, like paint and sips, terrarium making, sushi making classes? I actually have a separate company where we do that as well. And
Really?
yeah, experiences is a really big thing with me, because most of the time you get into like such just a normal way of doing things. Okay, what are we going to do on Saturdays? Okay, we're going to turn on Netflix, we're going to watch a movie, we're going to eat, we may cook out on the patio. What if you actually got up and said, you know what, I'm going to go to a paint and sip today? What does that even entail? I don't know, but I'm going to come back with a picture and I don't even know how to paint. So what is that experience like? Just, I'm not saying venture out into the Amazon jungle where you don't know, what type of animals may attack you, but just right in your own home front, what are some of the
Yeah.
things that you can do to just step outside of the box and give your mind just that place of, wow, I've never been there before. Yeah. And another one, definitely experiential cooking. Something that I actually want to do is go on a culinary vacation. It's called something else. It's
I don't know
culinary
what you're talking about.
experiences.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I definitely just I want to go and cook something that I've never cooked, learn in a way. It has to be outdoors, a big outdoors person. And so, I haven't looked into it yet, but that's something that I definitely know will happen in the near future. So
And
experiences all day.
speaking of learning, just to wrap up here, what do you want your clients to walk away with once they've honed down the four pillars?
Hmm.
They've they're on that journey to transform their life and live a healthier, more fulfilling lifestyle, what do you want them to walk away with?
I want them to walk away with knowing that by them making changes, it actually just helped their life be more sustainable in a healthy fashion. They've created a real healthy environment because the goal with the client is not for them to stay with me 8 and 9 months. Within 3 months, they should be able to just move on and know what to do. Although there are some people that need accountability. Honestly, there's some people that don't have a problem with eating. They know exactly what to do, but they need to be part of a group, or they just really need accountability. One thing that my clients, they're required to do is they have to take a picture of their food and send it to me on a daily basis. So
Mm,
I am on top of them. It
yeah.
is really important. They have to do that. And because I'm not really in it just to, say that, hey, I teach people how to eat. I really want to see my clients vibe. I want to see them just at a great place afterward and feeling good and living life and doing experiences.
Wonderful. And you know what? With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Again, thank you so much, Yoshi, for coming on the podcast and sharing all this wonderful information with us. And I will link your website down below. And I encourage
Yes.
all of you to check her out. And if you're in the Atlanta area, or do you also consult to people outside the area?
Oh, yeah, it's totally virtual. And it is
Okay.
for women only. And just so you know, we are starting a new class July 7th. So,
July
yeah.
7th.
And half off. So it'll
All
be a
right.
great time to
Wonderful.
start.
And for all of you who are watching and or listening, if you like this kind of content, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe.